Hello there, welcome to my presentation on graph readiness, where I'm going to talk about moving from single bar graphs to single line graphs. My name is Robert Ongcoy, English language educator, and I'm going to lead you through this presentation. Now today, this is what I'm going to talk about. We're going to look at the differences between bar graphs and line graphs, then we're going to jump straight in on how to read it. I'm also going to introduce you to the different types of language we use in a line graph description. So if you're ready, come along. First, let me start by comparing bar graphs and line graphs. The difference between single bar graphs and line graphs start by, well, taking a look at the factors. As you know, in a single bar graph, we might be measuring different things like the number of apples, bananas, and oranges. The y-axis looks at the measurement. That doesn't change no matter what kind of graph you look at. But the x-axis does show us these different categories or factors that we're looking at. The main thing that we looked at for language was compare-contrast, as well as comparative and superlative adjectives. Now when we look at the line graph, we're looking only at one factor, at least for a single line graph, and the y-axis is the same. X-axis is different because we're looking at period of time. Finally, in terms of language, the single line graph does introduce us to verbs of action and adverbs of speed or size. Let's take a look at that a little later on. Let's jump ahead to understanding the axes. The y-axis never changes. We could be talking about volume, cost, income, weight. We could look at countable nouns like the number of machines sold, or uncountable nouns like the amount of rice, flour, or water. The x-axis is our period of time. We use two different types of prepositions, from, year to year, or between year and year. Mind you, it doesn't have to be year, it could be month, it could be day. This helps us form our topic sentence. Now let's move on to sentence types. Two types of sentences are used to describe trends. We've got the real subject sentence, at least that's what I call it. This is where we look at the factor, like in this graph, the factor is café soda sales. Well, café soda sales increased gradually, and then I talk about the time frame between February and July. Note that the verb that I'm using is in the past simple, and I also follow it with an adverb to describe the way it increased. I could also describe trends in a graph by using existential sentences. That's where the subject is the word there. Now, there is not really the subject of the sentence, but it does explain what is happening. Let's take a look. Now you notice how the words have changed positions as well as form? Once again, there is not really a subject here. It's just there to explain what is or what was. The real subject of the sentence was an increase. I'm just saying that an increase happened. Notice that the factor has become part of a prepositional phrase. An increase, what kind of increase? A gradual increase. An increase in what? Café soda sales. And the time frame stays the same. Let's move on to the kind of action verbs that we could use. We have these verbs to explain any growth, these verbs to explain a loss or a drop in something. We also have special verbs to explain like big changes, like skyrocketing or rocketing or shot up for increases, and plummeted for really strong or dramatic changes going down. We also have parts in a graph where sometimes the change just stops changing and goes flat. We say this is leveled out. Finally, we have lots of up and down action, and we use the word fluctuated. Now I want you to remember fluctuated and the preposition between. Fluctuated between a high of something and a low of something. This is referring to the y-axis. Okay, we've looked at action verbs for real sentences. Let's take a look at the action nouns for our existential sentences. We can use the noun forms increase, growth, or rise to describe an upward movement, but this is the noun form. We could use fluctuation instead of fluctuated to describe the up and down changes. And we can use these words or these noun forms to describe a loss or decrease. And we put the in plus the factor and the time frame. Now we also have to use adverbs for our real subject sentences. For example, for big changes, notably, considerably, significantly, dramatically. And here's an example. Mary's weight dropped considerably in the last 3 months. It's more important how much weight she lost, not the time. We also have adverbs to describe small changes, fractionally, marginally, slightly. Now what happens when we move over to measuring speed? When speed matters, we're using adverbs to describe what happens on the x-axis. So please meet Joe. His job is a cleaner. He doesn't make a lot of money every year. He has a girlfriend, Mary. Now Mary is a CEO of her own company. You can imagine that one person makes more money than the other. In this case, it's Mary. If we look at a line graph and measure how long it takes to save 500,000 US dollars, Mary, well, she makes that kind of money very quickly. Joe takes a long time to earn that kind of money. So we could say her savings grew rapidly. In other words, she saved this amount of money in such a short time, while his savings rose gradually. What's more important is that it took a long time for him to get to the same amount of money on the y-axis. Okay, we've just covered the basic language points that you see in a line graph description. I hope this helps. Stay tuned for the next presentation about how to put together a line graph description.